And I want to thank you for letting me come to tell my story. I've been given a task of going around and trying to educate people and let people know about some of the stuff that's really going on. And I've gone all around California, and it's really great to see these little meetings have gone from, some of them started out at maybe 5-10 people, and now there's 30-40 people and even more in a lot of cases. So it's really great to see that more and more people are starting to get involved. I think the education part of this, sharing information, inspiring each other to get more involved, telling our stories is the key to this thing. Lanny was talking about the humorous nature of this. One day I hope to be able to sit around with friends and laugh about the insanity that has been the last 4 years of my life. Unfortunately, right now, it's not very funny at all. And I have had experience with people that have been in hospitals because of cannabis. But it wasn't because of the cannabis, it was because of the law enforcement that caused these people to be in the hospital because they were using cannabis. And many times these people were following California law and doing things that we're supposed to be able to do. And law enforcement still got involved, and oftentimes state agencies, not just federal agencies. And they've come in and raided and assaulted and hurt people. And to the point where they really didn't have the wherewithal to even fight their case. And there's a lot of things that people don't realize. So I want to ask a few questions before I get started. Just so you know, I've been telling this story for 4 years. And each time I tell it, unfortunately, it gets a little bit longer. And so the story that used to be able to go 5 minutes and I could tell the whole story in great detail has come to a point where I'm going to try to go through bullet points, and then I'm going to stick around after this, and then you guys can ask questions if you have them, so that I can get through all the information. There's literally 4 years of law enforcement, court, lawyers dealing with this thing. It's been a literal full-time job between living it, fighting it, and trying to rally support and get people to participate in this so that other people don't have to go through it. So it's kind of been my life. I'm going to try to consolidate it into 10 minutes or less. So this is something new. I tend to be long-winded anyways. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewind to 4 years ago. Oh wait, no, I was going to ask some questions. Sorry. The cannabis is working. How many of you people in this room believe that the activities that you participate in regarding cannabis, cultivating, possessing, transporting, distributing, under the protection of California law, believe that you're actually protected under California law? Anybody? One person. Okay. Well, it's a good thing to think. And in some cases, you're right. There you go. And you're actually more correct, because the problem is California law is supposed to affect all of California, right? Equally. Equal protection under the law. Our Constitution says that. But, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work out that way. In Vallejo, we have a judge that says, clearly these people are acting in accordance with California law. And in Long Beach, we have a judge that says, yeah, right. We have a California Narcotics Officers Association that teaches its California narcotics officers that this whole medical thing is all bullshit. Pardon my French, but that's what they teach them. I've sat in trial after trial after trial and heard experts testify as to what is legal. Well, guess what? It's not the same in every courtroom. And every judge doesn't rule the same. And so there is no equal protection of anything. You might get lucky and get the one cop that pulls you over that recognizes your state card or your physician's recommendation. But you might get one that doesn't. I've got people that I know that have had their cards ripped up. State card, MMP, the protected by SB 420, our medical marijuana program. Supposed to be able to present it to any law enforcement officer. If you're acting in compliance with that law, they're supposed to honor it and let you go. I've known more than one defendant who's had that card seized, ripped up, tossed on the ground. So that's just the reality that we live in sometimes. Other times, there's been cases where in a warranted raid, they've come in, looked at a garden, seen the recommendations attached to the plants, interviewed the owner, determined it was legitimate, walked out, never caused them any more problems. So what do? How do we know when we're safe? Well, what we need to know is that we're not necessarily safe. So we need to keep changing this until the law actually, the enforcement of the law catches up to the law. Okay, right now it hasn't. So I think it's important to realize when we're talking about cases that are going to the appellate courts and the Supreme Court, that's this process actually working itself out. The appellate courts are establishing case law that can be brought into these trials. Okay, and every single time another case. We just had 2 recent cases, the Jovan Jackson case and the Colvin case, that have given us a little bit more strength in the courtrooms. Although, plenty of judges don't recognize any of it, and they say, too bad, take it to the appellate court. I'm not buying it. Judges are still ruling that you can't have a medical defense, even though clearly you're a qualified patient. They're saying you're not acting under the boundaries of the law, because they don't agree with the way the law is set up, because it hasn't been completely clarified. The fact that the Supreme Court is getting involved in some of these cases is amazing, because it starts to bring the constitutionality of these. Okay, so once we get the Constitution behind us, we're in pretty good shape. But we don't have it yet. There's not been a ruling that's given us the protection that we deserve. So what do? We have to keep on taking these cases to trial. You know, it's unfortunate that I have to recommend that, because I'm going to tell you kind of a grueling story about what that means. You know, in a lot of cases, they don't even file charges. They just take all your stuff. And they hope you don't, I would hope that you don't go to get it back, because that's what you're going to be doing, is asking for them to file charges, and then you get to go through the whole legal aspect of it. So here I'm going to go through a 4-year ordeal with bullet points. So this is going back to 2008, is when this story began. I opened up a storefront collective in Garden Grove, and before opening it up, consulted many attorneys and legal experts and all the people in the movement as to how to do this right. I wanted to be as compliant as I could. I realized federal law doesn't protect anything, but I said if state law, I'm completely compliant, they say they're not going to mess with me. Supposed to have the 10th Amendment and all these good things. So I said, I'm going forward with this, believing that the law is going to protect me. We set up everything following the law. This was just before the AG guidelines came out, but we didn't have to make a whole lot of corrections once they did come out. Got pulled over for transporting 10 pounds of cannabis. First time I'd ever been, I got pulled over, I got arrested, and I got set with a bail of $25,000. First time in my life I've ever had any issues with law enforcement, hadn't had a speeding ticket, nothing. I mean, I'm just a guy that lays low, okay? Been a cultivator for a long time, and because of that I've been careful, not had to deal with law enforcement. I got charged with multiple felonies, okay? Made bail, got out of jail, and had to hire a lawyer. Never had to hire a lawyer before. So got to spend some time researching and ultimately chose a lawyer. Went to court over 30 times in that year. Okay, so each time you go to court, of course, it's time spent and facing a judge that could decide to take you into custody for whatever reason. So you have to deal with that. At the end of this 11 months, the case was dismissed, and the judge ruled that I was in compliance with California law, and ruled that not only was my case dismissed, all charges dropped, I'm restored whole, but that I got my property back. So I got to go into the Riverside County Sheriff's Department and retrieve my cannabis. And they literally loaded 10 pounds of cannabis onto my truck. Well, it's not true. They stole 1.5 pounds of it, and I wasn't going to fight that too bad. And of course, the plants they seized were already dead and crumbly. Oh yeah, and they turned over the money they seized to the feds. And they says, well, you can go sue them for it if you want. I took my cannabis and I drove on home. Okay, so I was in a unique position. I mean, I had this order that told me I'm compliant by a Superior Court judge, and the cops gave me my pot back. You know, how many of us can say that? Not too many. I was invincible. Well, that lasted 5 weeks, and 5 weeks later I got raided. It was a big story, and like I said, I'll get into details later on. This is where I get stuck usually. 11 months after the raid, they offered me a deal, a felony deal with 3 years probation, no jail time. Pretty sweet deal. Most people would take it. I got into this believing the law was behind me. I made a decision at that point that I'm not a criminal. And so I said, no thank you, let's take it to the box. That's when all my troubles began. A month later, they charged me. Went into court to answer the charges. They hit me with a $240,000 bail. And when I couldn't make that bail, they took me into custody. They took me into the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in Los Angeles, which, if any of you don't realize, is considered one of the worst institutions in America. And that's where I sat for a little while. We had a bail reduction hearing. They dropped it down to $120,000, where I had some angels come into my life and put up their retirement money and sprung me. Okay, so this is now taking us up to January 2011. Went through 11 more months of pre-trial crap. Spent over 40 more days in court. Ultimately, I went to trial. Oh no, prior to trial, the prosecution filed a motion to remove or to disallow my medical defense in California. The judge granted that motion. So I was walking into trial with no defense. Okay? Our attorneys filed a writ to the appellate court, and prior to trial starting, literally the day before I was supposed to pick a jury, they put a stay on the trial. And they agreed to hear it. Now this was kind of a miracle. This was unheard of. The appellate court never picks up a case before trial, but they did this time. Then they ended up ruling that day, later on. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and my trial was supposed to start right after Thanksgiving. They gave me my defense, so I was stoked. I was like, okay, that's all I need, I'm good to go. We got into court. The judge didn't want to give us any time to prepare defense. He says, we're going to pick jury, let's move forward. From that point forward, we had an 18-day, and it was considered to be a kangaroo court trial. There was articles written about it. It was insane. I got convicted. I got convicted of 12 counts of sales. Okay? The prosecution wanted to take me back into custody right away because of the serious nature of the charges, and the judge didn't do that, fortunately. During the trial, I had support. I had a courtroom full of supporters. I had protests outside the courtroom every single day for 18 days. And people were taking notes and documenting what was happening. And every single day, everybody was appalled at what happened in that courtroom. And when I got convicted, before I was sentenced, the lawyers filed a motion for a new trial, saying that there was jury misconduct, prosecution misconduct, and the judge's misconduct. Fortunately, I had all those people watching, because we filed declarations by more than 30 people as to what they saw. I went into sentencing 2 weeks later, expecting to be taken in. The prosecution had actually recommended to the judge a harsh sentence, because through this whole thing, and we'll take a step back when I'm all done with this to talk about the other side of what's happening, I've become very active and very outspoken, and I've published hundreds of videos and written articles about this whole process, what's happening, trying to wake people up to see what's actually happening while we're thinking we're protected. And after I got convicted, I did a video that talked about how crazy that was and how wrong it was and how they made the wrong decision. And the prosecutor went up to the judge and says, this guy is not being remorseful and he's being defiant, and look, he wrote, even put a video up about it, and trying to get a harsher sentence for me. So this was a really personal thing. I went in to be sentenced, and the judge recused himself. He realized that we had him over a barrel because of the way we filed this motion, and he had written some crazy letter to the prosecution, and use that as an excuse. But it didn't matter. He stepped down. That never happens. Notice a common thread here. How many times have I said this never happens? Okay, well, it keeps happening, and it continues on. It went to another judge. We went through this whole process. We got a judge that said, hey, I'm not familiar with this case. Give me the transcript. It's going to take a while. 4 months later, she comes back and she lambasted this judge. It was the greatest speech I've ever heard. A judge just blasting this other judge. And I have a copy of the transcript, and I want to set it to music. So if there's any musicians out there, I want to have the ballad of Judge Kasani one day, because it was just beautiful. And she just said what a horrible trial this was, and how miscarriage of justice. And it was just brought tears to my eyes that there was maybe a chance through all of this crap that a little bit of justice might actually happen. Because, you know, it's pretty dark when you're going through all this stuff. I mean, really dark. So anyway, so I get a new trial. Now this takes us up to last April 2012. Well, I'm out of money. I don't have an attorney that can take on the new trial. So now I'm to the public defender's office. Whatever, we're still going forward. Ultimately, I get an alternate public defender, and we're preparing for trial, and I find out that the prosecutor has now gone to the appellate court to try to appeal the decision to give me a new trial. So now they're trying to take their conviction back. Spending more of your money. Remember, through this whole thing, everything I've talked about has cost you, taxpayers, a lot of money. Stuff doesn't come cheap. I've personally hired probably 80 people for at least a year through this case alone. And then you add my case to the thousands of others, and you wonder how our budget problems have actually occurred. So now the appellate court puts a stay on the trial. And meanwhile, we're filing motions trying to use all this misconduct to get a dismissal of the charges, which is what should have happened all along. Well, during this time, again, I'm kind of an activist. I'm kind of outspoken, and I kind of go out of my way to test the law. And I was driving from one place to another, possessing lawfully an amount of cannabis, and I got pulled over. It ended up, I got my cannabis seized, but no charges were filed. I didn't get a ticket. Next thing I know, we're in court. We're filing some motions. I even told all the supporters, don't even come, nothing's going to happen. Next thing I know, the prosecutor goes, Judge, Your Honor, I've got this video. It shows Mr. Grumbine being defiant and illegal, again, doing his activities. She plays part of this video. The judge rules, you're in custody. Next thing I know, I'm back to Twin Towers. Okay, but this time, he revoked my bail and doubled it. So now I had $120,000 bail. Okay, think about that, and think about what bails reasonably might be in any given case. Now I have a $250,000 bail. Now mind you, in drug charges, they do what they call a 1275 hold, which means that any money I've ever made, I could never bring to it, because they say it's dirty money. So there has to be money put for this bond that is got a paper trail that's bulletproof. And the prosecution challenges it all along the way. So now I'm in Twin Towers again. This time though, there's no charges. I mean, I'm not convicted of anything, and I'm there indefinitely because there's a stay on my trial. So potentially I could be there for a year or more. Okay? So I don't know if any of you people understand about the realignment program that's going on, but they're literally emptying out state prisons, not emptying them, but making them to a capacity that's humane, and they're taking those people and putting them into the county facilities, okay, which means they're bulging now. Okay, so what they're doing is they're taking lesser offenses and they're reducing the time. They're taking whatever time that you're given and the time that you actually spend, and they're doubling it and doing all these crazy things. So literally, a county year sentence, a county lid, people are doing 42 days on a year sentence. Okay, I spent 37 days in the Twin Towers without being convicted of anything. Okay, so I've already done a year sentence on something that should have been dismissed. Okay. in these places, state prison, county jail, there are people there, most of the people there, more than 50%, probably as much as 60 or 70%, are there on drug-related offenses or probation or parole violations. And I spent 6 weeks talking to these people, getting their stories. I wrote 120 pages while I was in there just about what was going on. Okay, that's a lot of people in there, criminals made out of non-criminals. Okay, the stuff Lanny was talking about is absolutely true. Follow the money, prison guard union, research it. You will be afraid. Okay, scary, scary business. The prison complex. They're building prisons to make room for criminals that aren't criminals. And that's what they're doing. They're turning non-criminals into criminals to support this habit of prison. Okay? So, finally, after 6 weeks of a whole other fiasco trying to get a property bond to happen, which didn't happen, another angel comes forward and puts her retirement up, and I'm free on a $250,000 bail. Okay? Now, look up Jerry Sandusky and see what his bail was. Okay, really bad guy, got convicted of really bad things. Look up the cops that killed the guy in Fullerton, beat him to death. Look up that guy's bail. And then compare it to this. And realize that there are some things that are happening in our justice system, and let's put giant quotes on that, that need to be changed. We need to make some reform. So the message that I have, unfortunately, we have this great message of we're winning. We've got legal states now. We've got 18 states with medical laws. We're doing great, but we're not there yet. Monday, day after tomorrow, I'm going to be in federal court at Aaron Sandusky's sentencing hearing. Okay? He was operating a legal collective. He had the FBI in his collective prior to his raid telling him, don't worry about anything. We see that you're doing it just right. And now, after this case, he was the only person that didn't turn over and take a plea deal, and now he's facing 10 to life in federal prison. Mandatory minimum sentencing. Okay? Think about that. This is really scary stuff. Well, we're celebrating our victories and, casually enjoying these freedoms. There are people that are in federal and state prisons right now for doing nothing more than what we've done. So I'm here to this is a call to action. The other side of the time when I was fighting this, I spent my time trying to educate people about it and trying to get people to become involved. There's a lot of ways we can become involved. I believe that every single one of us can make a difference in a lot of ways. Now, the political end of it is huge. We need to become politically active. There was a time in American history where politics was something everybody was involved in. It was just normal. We all participated. It's become so far from that. And this community needs to rise up. If the people that supported the use of cannabis, not even necessarily just the users, but the people that support it, were to make their voices heard, we wouldn't have a war on drugs. Public sentiment would say, this is what we want, it's acceptable. But we haven't done it. So really since Nixon took office, and since 73, when he really launched the big war on drugs, that's when, if you look at statistics, our prison population has gone from something that was somewhat normal across the world to 2.5 times the highest other nation. Okay, we have more prisoners by leaps and bounds than any other nation in the world. Okay, we've become this prison nation. And the differences are happening with the laws, but it's going to take a while before these laws are actually being enforced. So what can we do? We can do the obvious things, get involved politically. When we have a candidate that's going to run for any office, we need to get off our butts, put the Doritos down, and get out there and support these people. We really do. If we can get more and more candidates into office, think about it, 10, 15, 20 years ago, to even think that there was a candidate that might support us, it wasn't. There wasn't anybody out there that even had a chance of winning. And now we've got congressional candidates. I helped a congressional candidate try to get elected. He didn't get elected, but participated in the process. He might have, and maybe next time he will. Plenty of local and lower level offices are held by supporters, and it's becoming more and more that way. So we all need to participate in this. Reaching out when there's an injustice, reaching out to our local and even higher offices, these petitions that come around, participate. Don't just sign them, pass them on and get 2 other people to do it. That's what's going to make our voice get heard. And then you get to court. How many of you guys have been in court, whether for yourself or sat in a hearing or a trial because of cannabis? Couple? Okay. That right there is indicative of part of the problem that we have. Most of the cases where people get arrested and charged with cannabis are resolved with a plea deal. What does that mean? That person that got charged said, I'm guilty. I accept some better thing than I would get if I got convicted. Just leave me alone. Okay? And the jury never hears it. And there's nothing that could possibly happen to further this thing forward. Most of the time, plea deals end up in probation. Okay, so what does that mean? People don't realize what they're doing. I have a group called Human Solution. We do court support, we support prisoners, and we educate defendants. And I have so many people that come to me after they sign a plea deal, and then they come and find out, oh, I didn't realize that they could come and search my house anytime they wanted. I didn't realize that when I got pulled over for a routine traffic stop, they asked me if I'm on probation or parole. And that means get out of the car, we're searching it. They didn't realize that, because they didn't read the fine print. All they realized was, I don't have to go to jail. Okay? They realized I don't have to go to trial, I don't have to do these things. So, you face greater charges if you get convicted, but you know what? The courts are used to these deals getting through. 87% of the cases that come to the courts get resolved in deals. That leaves a pretty small percentage that actually gets argued out in trial. What do you think would happen if every single case that was a cannabis-related case, or even a drug-related case for that matter, every defendant said, you know what, take it to the box. I want to let a jury decide. What do you think would happen? Our courts would stop. Okay? They're already backed up. It would come to a gridlock. It would come to a stop. And what do you think would start happening with these judges that are used to spending their day on their calendar, sitting through a regular session where they have 42 people acknowledge plea deals? Instead, they'd have to stop and have a 4-day trial, a 3-day trial, a 6-day trial, an 18-day trial. Think they might rethink how they act? Think they might start reducing or increasing the amount of cases that got dismissed at prelim? I'll bet you it would change. Think if more of these cases would happen, more of these cases would get dismissed, and it would start to show the public sentiment. And prosecutors don't like filing cases that they're not going to win. Prosecutors have a 90+% conviction rate anywhere you go in California, probably across America. Why is that? Because they only take on the cases that they know they're going to win. And in these cases, most people plead out and they win. If we were to take and become more active and be not only willing to fight our cases because we're right, we're not guilty of anything, but when somebody does and you see somebody out there that says, hey, can somebody come to my court case? We should make that important, because it changes. When you come to court for somebody else, it empowers that defendant, it helps out the attorney, and it changes the way the prosecutor acts, and the juries notice it too. Makes a huge difference. I'm not saying show up and be stupid. I'm saying show up, be well-dressed, well-behaved, and act like our opposition would. Okay? Can make a huge difference. And finally, the most important thing that any of us can do, which we don't, is get selected on a jury. How many of us has served on jury duty and got picked in a trial? Okay? Well, that's pretty big for the amount of people in this room. I would have expected 0. Okay? Now, what happens? We get jury summons, and we say, I don't want to go to jury duty. Pain in my butt, right? So, but nowadays you have to show up, or they'll put a warrant out for you. So we show up, and they ask us some questions, and we give them answers that we know they're not going to like. Or we show up looking haggard, or we show up looking like somebody they don't want to pick. Most of us don't even get picked for the first round. And then, if we do, we get selected to sit on a panel, what do? If it's a drug case, I can assure you, because I've sat in dozens of cases and watched these juries get picked. We go up there, and the judge will say, is there anything, any of you, or is there anybody here that feels that they could not be fair if they were given this case? And we raise our hands and we say, well, I'm a patient and I really don't think I could convict anybody. And they say, thank you for your time, get on out. And we leave and we go, I didn't have to do that. Or we get to the part where they actually do the voir dire and the attorneys start asking questions and we do the same thing. We reveal, well, you know, I really have a problem with cops. I really have a problem with drug cases. I really have a problem with this or that or the other thing. What we don't do is shut our mouth and say, yes, Your Honor, I can be fair. I can do my job. I can do my civic duty and fairly judge this case and offer a verdict. Because that's what our opposition does. They come in and they say, he's guilty. But they don't say it. They come in well-dressed and they answer the questions and they say, yep, and yes, of course I can be fair. And they say, oh, we'll take you. And that's what happens. And panel after panel after panel of jury are not of your peers. And I've watched cases that were, should be slam dunk. Little 20-plant garden in my backyard with recommendations, no sales, no nothing. Should be just clean and easy. Hung jury, 11-1. Not in our favor. Go figure that one out. Okay? So, many times convictions, in Aaron Sandusky's case, there's a power that we all possess, and they don't want you to know about it. Okay? There's a thing called jury nullification. And what that is, and it came out of slavery, and it came out of people's unwillingness to accept a bad law. And what it means is that, especially in federal court, where there's no way anybody can win unless one juror says, you know what, that's a bad law. And I refuse to convict that person. And come up with whatever grounds you need, hopefully become the foreman and convince everybody else that your position's right. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that a judge or anybody else can do to punish a juror. The juror is kind of one of the highest positions you could sit in as a citizen. You have a power of a governor or a president in that you can keep a person from going to prison, and there's nothing they can do. The only thing you have to remember is, again, we have to keep our mouth shut. You can't say, I'm going to nullify this, or they'll throw you off and put on a substitute. Okay? But that's the one thing. If we were all to say, you know what, I'm going to look at this a little bit different. When I see that jury summons, that's my opportunity. That's a chance that I have to maybe make a difference in an innocent man's life. And maybe in somebody who's just like me. And imagine if you got stuck in that spot. You would sure want that one person that felt that way to be on your jury. Okay? So walking out of here, you have a power and an opportunity, if you have a jury summons, to maybe think about it a little bit differently. Maybe to realize that I, as one person, can make a difference in this world that'll help to end this war on drugs, which is what we're all here to do, is to end prohibition, end this war on drugs, so we can get back to living. Go fight some other battles, but there's plenty of things to fight. Let's end this one once and for all. So thank everybody for your time. If you have questions, I'll be around for a little bit, and please get involved. Thank you.
Okay, it's about 4 o'clock. I was trying to end the meeting.